Now, clash of 19th century ideologies, which begs the question, was ist ideology? What is an ideology? Anyone? What's an ideology? I always ask you.
Like a set of beliefs.
Then there's Lucas. Yes, a set of beliefs. Okay, excellent, 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 excellent. So we're going to look at various camps, schools of thought, various ways of looking at the world and looking at government's role in our lives. All right. In Europe, the conflicting ideologies of conservatism and liberalism shaped the 19th century. This is where they're given birth. They have existed prior, and actually, when you get into APUSH or whatever they call American for you, the Federalists and Anti-Federalists are an outgrowth of this. Still U.S. history foreshadowing. But these two groups are going to argue and jockey back and forth over how Europe should look, should behave post-Napoleon. One of them is going to hold sway for a long period of time. If you think about it, okay, you're looking at me. So the 18th century, the Enlightenment, the revolutions would tend to fall under which of those? Okay, and it's kind of being sort of rhetorical. So because of who kind of ran the ship in this century, historically and typically speaking, when you get past it, the other always seems to come back. So here we go. This is the Estates General. This is where the National Assembly sat. And during the time of the French Revolution, they actually sat according to political views. If you watch a State of the Union address, our Senate is set up that way. Democrats tend to sit on one side, Republicans tend to sit on the other. Conservatives sat on the right, they supported the king, and liberals, desiring a republic, sat on the left. That is where the terms left and right, conservative and liberal originate. Because the conservatives sat on the right. And conservatives today are considered leaning to the right. Liberals to the left. Okay, and these terms left and right exist today. Ooh, continuity. All right. You should hopefully, let me rephrase it more optimistically, realistically, less judgmentally. Hopefully by now you're starting to see continuities, and you're starting to see changes, and you're starting to see those historical thinking skills a little more sort of organic. This is a political spectrum. Conservatives sat on the right, supported the king, like I said. This is a typical political spectrum. The most important word in that is spectrum. It is a range. Every conservative does not think the same about all things. Every liberal does not think the same about all things. There are varying degrees. We, in this culture, in the 21st century, have become very, very, very used to the term spectrum, typically when it relates to maladies, most notably autism. But it's an analogy that works because there's a very, very, very wide range in how it affects those who are afflicted. Not that political ideology is an affliction, but anyway. So center right wing, extreme right wing, center left, extreme left. And then you kind of get on the next line, the arrow, you kind of see how they feel government should react. And then down below are terms that are used interchangeably and really should be ignored and avoided on the political line, because communism and socialism are economic systems, not political systems. But we tend to, we meaning 20th century America, we tend to lump these two terms in with lefties, with hippie liberals or whatever. Whatever term has been bandied about. But these are economic systems. Now, typically, these economic systems are more readily embraced by people going in this direction, but they're not mutually inclusive. So I want us to understand that economics are different, because part of the reason Venezuela, and they love the fact that this is the example, part of the reason that Venezuela failed as a socialist economy is because they had more of this kind of government. You remember, if the leader's wearing a uniform, not good. Your government has more to do with how successful your country is than your economic system. Trust me, look at France. Why'd they revolt? For leadership. All right. So you'll see this the rest of your life. If you take international relations class, you're actually going to find out where you sit. And if you're really a cool kid, you do it now, and then as a junior, and then as a senior. Sort of like reading a book. If there's a book you like, you should read it every 5 years, because it's never the same book twice, because you're not the same person 5 years later. Some people are surprised what happens to them over time when they answer these questions. All right. Come on. Stay nice. Where'd it go? Whoa. I lost them. Try this again. All right. So, Big Lucas. All right. Okay. Conservatives believe that national, historic, and religious traditions are the essential foundations of society. Okay, again, conservatives then, conservatives now believe this, that national traditions, historic traditions, religious traditions are the essential foundations of a society, and especially their society. But typically speaking, for society as a whole, they tend to believe that if we adhere to these principles, these ideologies, is the best way forward.
Downgraded water bottles.
Huh?
Downsized water bottles.
It's just too heavy. And I don't know. As long as I know how many of those I have to drink. Okay. Conservatives maintain that all change should be gradual. This is a very, very important slide, because it does not say they oppose change. Nor does it say we should revert to glory days, which is not conservatism. That's far right, I guess. I don't know what that is. You can't go back. Anyway, they just argue that change should be more incremental. It should be slower. Not this ready, fire, aim. Let's change now because it's not working. I think a lot of us, those people, various members of the media, various adults in society, various high school students in society tend to think that if someone is conservative, that they don't ever want to move forward, and that's not the case. It's just careful progress is the way of looking at it. There may be a problem, but we're going to think about the best ways to do it, and perhaps if we went back to how we used to do things, we'll be able to move forward. That's where they're going when they're talking about historic traditions and religious traditions, is can we use what worked in the past to move us forward, not go back to that time. I hope. Conservatism appealed to those frightened by the social disorder, by the violence, by the terror, by Robespierre, and all that happened by the French Revolution. So all of that, blow it all up, which is maybe how it seemed, is what frightened people. It's also worth noting that I think it'd be wrong to assume it frightened everybody. And I think it'd be wrong to assume that every single European knew what was going on in France, believe it or not. Eventually, but as an historic event more than an actual occurrence. I mean, yes, there is the newspaper. Yes, there is word. Yes, there are roads and turnpikes and and wagons and horses, but there's no train yet. There's no telegraph yet. So news is still, although faster, slow. Everybody still is not literate. Everybody is still primarily a farmer or a peasant. So there's a chance that once you got outside of Paris, it probably took years, or until they came after you, to know what was going on. The monarchy, the aristocracy, and the church are the groups and people in that sphere were typically the ones who you would call conservative. Okay, that's all there is. Ooh. We could test Friday. If I finish these today, we can test Friday. All right. Here come the questions. All right. In 1815, at the Congress of Vienna, a very, very important thing. A Congress is a meeting. It's not, I mean, we think of Congress as a legislative body. It's our lawmaking body. A Congress, no, so I'm thinking of concert. Because the conservative forces tried to reshape Europe after the French Revolution. Okay, we can't let that happen again. We need to kind of go, like, slow down. We know what works. We know what'll bring stability. We need to set up Europe so that it operates in a way with which we understand, that we know. Okay, conservatives, they are people who are afraid of the dark because they don't know what's in it. Bless you, Judah. Not because it's dark. It's because no one knows what's in the dark. That's why you're afraid of the dark. Dark is just a lack of light. But because you don't know what's in it, that's what's scary. So Napoleon is defeated after a bunch of attempts. We can't let that reoccur. Here is a lovely political cartoon, just kind of showing you. Come on, here we go. The Emperor of Russia makes love for everyone. The Emperor of Prussia, he thinks for everyone. The King of Denmark, he speaks for everyone. The King of Bavaria, he drinks for everyone. The Emperor of Württemberg, he eats for everyone. And the Emperor of Austria, he pays for everyone. All right. So, again, it's just, don't worry about what this is. Just understand that they're all in this together. They all understand. That's right. They're all in this together. They all understand that if we're going to come out of this, if we're going to move forward, more importantly, if I'm going to get to keep my crown, we got to nip this in the bud right now and slow it down and get it under control and quiet these people down, these troublemakers, these meddlesome kids. Good Scooby-Doo on you there. And here is the big player in this time frame. Clemens von Metternich was an Austrian foreign minister, and he hosted the Congress of Vienna, or Metternich. Metternich is what it's known as. Sort of like the Metternich era of Europe. And so he calls this Congress and gets these leaders from countries together to try and figure out how to fix this. This is his whole name. Thank you. Clemens, don't write it down. Wenzel, Neoponik, Lothar, Fürst von Metternich, Wittenberg, Bierstein. Okay. Baustein. Herr Wachter could tell me. Anyway. And this is what Napoleon thought of him. Okay. And I actually had to edit it because it wasn't edited when I got this PowerPoint. So Napoleon was not a fan of Metternich. That's right. He was salt in silk stockings. Yes, he was. He was silt in silk stockings. All right. Metternich was committed to the principles of conservatism. He viewed liberalism and nationalism as a threat to stability. So the idea of creating your own nation, of those Enlightenment ideas of self-determination and sovereignty, and he thought that was analogous to chaos, that revolution is bad, status quo is good. And that's what we need for stability. We need things to go back to the way they were, in a sense, from a leadership standpoint, so that we can get our feet under us and move forward. What this class is, on a personal aside, what this class is doing is forced me to change my reading list for the summer. I'm going to read more stuff about Europe and things like that, and other parts of the world. I'm excited. And then this is just another quote. Union between the monarchs is the basis of the policy which must now be followed to save society from total ruin. Stop there. Union between the monarchs is how we can save society from itself, basically. That with monarchy is stability. Okay, so and he keeps on saying the first principle, where is it? Let the great monarchs strengthen their union and prove to the world that it is beneficial and ensures the political peace of Europe. Let monarchs reassert their authority, reassert their rule, and we will show the world that this is the best way to do it. This will bring about peace and prosperity to Europe. Trust us. So, in other words, let the monarchs back at it. That's what he thought. To paraphrase all that. And again, these are all on that slide, that giant PowerPoint. So if you want to go back and look at these quotes and kind of see how they fall into certain categories, by all means do. And again, identify how Metternich's ideas represent both continuity and change over time, because they do. I may have to pull these questions out, I think. Just saying, you might see these. All right. But that's not a difficult question to answer. What's the continuity piece in this? In Metternich's idea, what's the continuity?
He's a conservative.
That's great, but that doesn't answer the question. What is it about his ideas that show an example of continuity? Okay,
He wanted monarchs.
Yes, he wanted the monarchs, just like they did prior to the revolution, just like they've had. So the idea of keeping monarchs, that's the continuity. Okay, please make sure you understand that. If you don't, sign up to talk to me. What's the change?
I thought you were talking about from here to now, because that's what you said in the beginning. And I can
sorry,
think of a big
no.
change for that.
No. Continuity is from where he is back to before him. He
Okay.
can't possibly know continuity. The only way we can, Lucas, the only way you would be talking about now is if I had Reagan. I'm just saying it's a poor example, and then say how is he an example of, which would be a stretch, but I'm just saying. And then you would go back to Metternich, but this is Metternich to before him. So how is it showing continuity in what we've learned to up until him? That's the question. That's okay. And how is it a change to him? Going up to him historically, moving forward, and him being the end. Metternich is now modern time. That's where we are. Wherever we are is modern, because that's what we're studying. So prior to him, how is his idea an example of change?
Because it's a reaction to liberalism, which was brought upon by the Enlightenment.
Yep, that's it. They don't both have to go the same amount of time. They don't have to be 400 years long each. It's a change from it's a change from where we just were. This idea of the Enlightenment and unalienable rights and nation building and our own sovereignty and people making their own decisions, and now sudden, no, kings know best. Mothers know best. Kings know best. And that's what we're going to do. So that's continuity and change in one dude. And now that you kind of walk through that, don't let it freak you out quite as much. I hope. All right. Monarchies were restored that had been deposed by the French Revolution and Napoleon. So if you were a king or a queen, welcome back. Some of us missed you. I will say this, and this is an assertion, and this is just me thinking out loud, that people probably were happy that the war stopped. And they're probably happy that fighting stopped for a couple of reasons. One, their farmland is not being destroyed. Two, they're not being called away to fight anymore, because remember, most soldiers aren't rich. And three, it just means that we can kind of go back to, even for the peasant, something. And also remember, if you go back to the French Revolution, most peasants are probably okay with this, because the peasantry didn't want the king deposed. The peasantry, remember that, or especially when they start making Notre Dame not a cathedral, and they start changing calendars and being atheistic and blah 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 blah. Peasantry tends to be pretty religious, tends to be pretty Catholic, and which sort of falls in line with being conservative per the way these notes begin. So the vast majority of people are going to be okay with this. The people who aren't going to be okay with this are who?
The middle class.
Yeah, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, the very same people who got rid of the monarch. And because of growing economies and because of growing industry, it's still not as big as the peasantry, but it's going to be a bigger body. All right. Good. Excellent. Oh, hello. This is Louis the 18th, the younger brother of Louis the 16th. No way. Okay. And he's the legitimate, the Bourbons. It's not Bourbon, it's the Bourbon. That's sort of like the Tudors and the Stuarts in England. You had the Bourbon in France. And he is the legitimate Bourbon ruler of France. He comes back. But guess who's back? Back again. He is not Slim Shady. Ain't nothing slim about him. All right. Here is Europe after the concert of Europe. This is, again, Prussia, Eastern Austria, France, the Piedmont, Sardinia, the German states. Okay, and then in Italy, you have Parma, Modena, Lucca, Tuscany, and San Marino, the boundary of the German Confederation. So you got a bunch of stuff going on here. Just so you can kind of see the map, Sweden and Norway are one. The Netherlands are big. Belgium doesn't exist yet. You got the Kingdom of Poland. Still got the Ottomans. Okay. Leaders at Vienna sought to weaken France so that it couldn't wage wars of aggression. And the other thing they're trying to do here is balance power across Europe. But one thing the Congress of Vienna does well, that the Treaty of Versailles does not, and by Treaty of Versailles, I mean the one in 1919 that officially ends World War I, is, well, the next slide, and you'll see what I mean. Things there's literally a royal mob here. Okay, everybody's trying peace, justice, balance of power, indemnity. As for me, I'm a looker on all the indemnity asked for is a new hat. Okay. Anyway, that's just, again, the idea that they want the playing field level, that no one country should have more power than another. And this is what they did. Okay. So the victorious powers didn't want to impose a punitive or a harsh treaty that would humiliate and antagonize France. Basically, they lost. They lost Napoleon. They're going to lose land. You can see how they kind of changed things. But they didn't want to be so harsh to France that they got mad and felt a need to defend themselves. Well, you know, they just didn't. In fact, they invite France to this Congress to take part in this process. Very, very wise. 100 years later, we don't do this. And so we get World War II. All right. Well, not we. Europe doesn't do this. I say we, like we're living in Europe. The European countries post-World War I are very hard on Germany, if you haven't heard. And we'll get into that. Gosh, in April. Oh, exciting. War. World War I, the last romantic war. I love it. Americans don't give World War I the due it needs. It's just, if there's a cheesy movie or documentary on world wars, I have watched them on Amazon and Netflix. I've watched them all. I love that war. It's weird, I know. The Congress of Vienna enacted a settlement acceptable to both the victors and France. An actual settlement that both could sign. But again, these are all conservative leaders. These are all monarchs and the like. So there's probably very little other than a little land wrangling here and there that they're upset with. And whoever has a hand, ask your question.
So where is Vienna? Is it like a word for something else, or is it a place? Because I somehow missed that.
Vienna's a place.
Where is it located? Like
It's a capital city.
Of Austria.
Austria, yeah, it's in Austria.
Oh, okay.
The
Somehow
Austro-Hungarian, the Austrians kind of footed this thing. Metternich's Austrian. Yeah, if it's in Vienna, which is the capital of Austria, home of Beethoven, greatest songwriter of all time. All right. The next major European conflict would actually be World War I. Now, there are Franco-Prussian wars and there are other smaller wars, but a war that encompasses the entire continent, like the Napoleonic Wars did, won't happen for 100 years. So, regardless of your thoughts on conservatism or liberalism, for Europe, it worked. And just based on these notes, because that's all we have to go on, unless you want to read up on it on your own, which I'm never going to say no to reading, because they weren't heavy-handed with France, really helps this work. Now, France isn't crippled economically. France isn't crippled militarily. Yes, they're going to be unhappy people in France. Yes, they are going to have 2 more revolutions. Thank goodness, or else I never would have gotten Les Mis, which takes place, I believe, after the second, well, one of the next 2. But it's also, anyway, so if you haven't seen that, gosh, if it was playing, we should field trip it. That'd be a great field trip. Go see a musical. Oh, okay. Anyway, I digress. Moving on. After the Congress of Vienna, the so-called Age of Metternich, that's what the Congress of Vienna this is, conservative forces continue to challenge liberalism. So from 1815 throughout the rest of the 19th century in Europe, the struggle, for lack of a better word, but the contention between conservatism and liberalism is going to continue. You're also going to be surprised to see how not what you think liberalism is. Well, 19th century European liberalism. It's interesting. In a way, well, wait, I'll stop myself. All right, in a way, they're counterintuitive. I'll leave it at that. All right, so again, back to our map of Europe. England, Austria, Prussia, and Russia formed the Quadruple Alliance. Oh, and now the alliances start. Remember that word. You'll see that word again in 100 years. The alliances start. Signed agreements to preserve order or to preserve peace or to come to one's defense. Look, World War I is the greatest example, and I've used this all the time, of having someone's back and really wishing you didn't. That's what World War I is. If you've ever promised to be there for somebody, and at the end of the day, you really regretted it because you knew they were going to do something stupid, that's World War I. All right. But they're still your friend, and they're still your friend, and you agreed, and you're a person of your word, so you're going to do it. Remember that when we get to principe. All right. This one was to preserve the conservative order. So this was to make sure monarchs were monarchs and liberals were quiet. No revolution. Emperor Franz I, Kaiser Friedrich Wilhelm III of Prussia, and Tsar Alexander I of Russia. Those are three of them. Notice the clothing, well, with the exception of the Austrians, the clothing is a lot less poofy now. We're in the 19th century. It looks more like pants and a suit, and much less poofy. The Holy Alliance, formed by these three people, were used to fight liberal elements in Europe through the lens of Christianity and conservatism with that respect. So we have one group, those four countries, trying to make sure conservatism rules the day. And then we have this group through another lens, making sure that liberalism is held in check. So there are lots of different factions working together to make sure that the liberals, the threat to their order is what they're talking about. The threat to their title, the threat to their way of life, the threat to a world which they know, a world they understand. There is security in that. I don't know all your stories. If we were in class, I would know you better. I promise you I would. I went to 7 elementary schools in 5 years. So moving was not that big a deal to me, and the idea of a new set of people and the unknown was not that big a deal to me. But the unknown freaks people out. My sons have moved once, and that was just across town. And going to a whole different school set is off-putting. When you go from 8th grade to 9th grade, or 5th grade to 6th grade, what it's going to be like can be varying degrees of nervousness to terrifying. Their fear of what might happen to them and the world that they understand if liberalism won is that type of feeling. They like being in charge, but they also know how it works. And so that's kind of what's driving this. One, remaining in power, and two, understanding how it works, I think. And again, if you disagree, awesome. The great powers also agreed to hold periodic meetings or congresses to prevent crises. So in other words, if there was an issue, let's talk it out. Again, this is sort of, I think the next slide says it, this is like the world's first attempt at collective security, which is a term that exists today. The UN is a form of collective security. Before that, the League of Nations was ideally supposed to be a form of collective security. If we're all working this out, no one should fire a shot. ideally. So as far back as 1815, 1816, they understood this. For whatever motivation, the end result's worthwhile. No one's going to get shot in a war. And I can make money because wars are expensive. Sorry, I know. The effort to achieve consensus on foreign policy. Oh, there it is. This is called the Concert of Europe. All of Europe coming together, one voice, one band, one sound, one voice. This is the first experiment at collective security. See, that just smells like a word, like a phrase, like a term that you're going to hear. Well, I know before I'm finished with you. And it smells like something that you might see in May. Again, I don't know. These tests are written years in advance. But that just seems like a term that would be good to know. Collective security. Plus, it matters today. Again, there's connectivity. Or continuity, excuse me. No, it does connect to it. Concert of Europe, as it began to be called at that time, had in reality international law, which derived from Vienna Congress. Okay, basically, look. The most important thing in this, or one of the most important things, is the idea that once a boundary is established, it cannot be changed unless all 8 countries agree to it. You want to stop expansion? Get paperwork involved. Or you can pull Japan and just kind of leave. But that's later. All right. Everybody's sitting down. The Congress began disappointed liberals and nationalists across Europe, leading to revolts that tested the concert of Europe. Again, it's not going to be well received by everybody, but that just makes sense. Common sense should tell you that. Liberals, okay. You know what? I'm good. We're good. I was going to finish the whole thing. And we'll talk about liberals. I won't do the whole thing there. We'll talk about that. It's only 11:30. Liberals believe that government must protect the natural rights of the citizens, heavily influenced by the Enlightenment. It is there to protect the rights of each individual. Each of us, in the liberal sense, is afforded the same rights regardless of station in life. And now you can start seeing different, talk about comparing and contrast, and you can see some contrast here. Liberals supported civil liberties, the idea of habeas corpus. Ooh, what's that? Anybody? Habeas corpus?
It's it's the ability of the president to assume like dictatorial powers.
No, he suspended those. Talking about Lincoln? Lincoln suspended. Yeah, Lincoln suspended this. So what is this that Lincoln suspended? Very good, though, Sam. Anybody see a word in there that looks like a word in there?
Corpus looks like corpse.
Good. Show me the body. Is loosely, poorly paraphrased habeas corpus. You cannot be arrested without knowing why you're arrested. Habeas corpus means you're made aware of your crime before you're taken in, which prior to the Enlightenment did not happen. Freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, all these things, these civil liberties, liberals supported, which means conservatives didn't, to varying degrees. Not every liberal was say what you want, do what you want, worship what you want. It's a spectrum. But by and large, generally speaking, okay. Liberals admired the British constitutional monarchy and favored a representative government. They opposed full democracy, which makes sense. Why oppose full democracy?
Because the French just had like an absolute monarchy, and they also just had a revolution.
Right, but what is full democracy?
Everyone,
Every single person has a vote. Like you don't even vote on representatives.
Yeah, it's analogous to Greek's direct democracy, one man, one vote. So why don't the liberals want one man, one vote?
Because they're most likely outnumbered.
By whom, Campbell?
The lower class, you said the peasants would be
Yes.
conservative.
Yes, the lower class. They'll never get anything passed if every man can vote. Even with a representative government, even with a non-monarchical government, it'll still be conservative ideals that carry the day. Or at least not their ideals that carry the day. So we can't have that. Look at that, 19th century voter suppression. See, it's today. All right. Slow down. Liberals advocated economic individualism and opposed. Okay, so this is where it's different. Okay. Liberals don't want the government in anything. Protect my rights, stay out of my life, stay out of my house, stay out of my bedroom, stay out of my newspapers, stay out of my head, and stay out of my business. European liberals are closer to what political party in America? Anybody?
Republicans.
So Republicans.
Not Republicans.
Democrats.
Definitely not Democrats. There are 55 political
Libertarians.
parties. Libertarians. The government's job is to protect my liberty and nothing else. Early 19th century liberalism in Europe was a very, well, the term is laissez-faire, very hands-off my stuff. If you think about it, the conservative, we want the king back kind of governments are very, and by the way, the other terms are small government, big government. The conservatives are very big government, with the government telling you what you will say, what you will worship, what you will do. That's very much in your life. Liberals and 19th century liberals don't want that. Just protect my liberties and let me lead my life. Keep me safe. Protect my liberties. Let me lead my life. That's 19th century liberalism. Liberals today aren't this. Beyond the idea that all men, beyond the Enlightenment piece, liberals today, at least in American politics, want the government involved, and conservatives today don't want the government involved in our lives to a certain extent. It's weird. Our government, our political systems today are an amalgam of all these different European policies, the sheer fact that we are 50 independent, separate little nations, little states. Like our government is, our country is too diverse to have two parties. And you talk about tradition, we're so afraid to let that go because we don't know what it'll look like. But we need more than two parties, in my opinion. All right, well, we have them, but they need to be viable. Again, so if you don't understand, if you have any questions, please ask. We'll keep going. Most liberals were bourgeoisie, middle class, who wanted views to be represented in government and economic freedom. They want a seat at the table. They, again, as I said, they are just as wealthy as some of these people. They are more influential and more important to the security and safety and financial success of a country than the aristocracy, in a way, because they're in the business of business. They're your traders, they're your merchants, they're your entrepreneurs. They're making the money. And they want the freedom to make money. They want the government to make sure those freedoms exist. but they want a voice at the table. They want to be in the room where it happens. That's what they want. Working class Europeans often embraced more radically liberal ideas because their conditions were sucky. All right, we have passed the first industrial. We're going to talk about industrialization and the Industrial Revolution in Unit 6, and they kind of go together. What they do go together. They're happening at the same time. Working conditions are awful. And so ironically, the very people who are, the king, yes, it's King Louis XVIII. It's ironic that the people who call themselves liberals actually, by how they treat their workers, cause this to happen to them. Okay, the rise of socialism, the rise of unions, the rise of people like Marx and Engels and all that is going to come about because of how horrible the conditions are in the factories that those bourgeoisie leaders want the government to stay out of so they can make their money. Okay. So was the French Revolution a success? Has any revolution ever really been a success? It was our essential question. Are any revolutions truly revolutions? We'll come back to that. I'll probably be posting that at the end of the week. Are any revolutions truly revolutions? Remember, I also said that the American Revolution was begun long before a shot was fired. All right. I think because they have two more revolutions, the answer is no. Remember, if you treat a revolution like a cold, if you never get rid of if you never change your health and change the conditions that led to you getting sick in the first place, and you keep getting sick. Remember, at the end of the French Revolution, what was not addressed? Besides this Coldplay cover, but what was not addressed? Ben? Donald? Why were the French citizenry mad in 1789?
The bread shortage.
They were hungry and they were broke. Tax structure was horrible. They were taxed to death and they were hungry. The revolution ended. The tax structure was still broken and they were still hungry. If you do not get rid of the causes of an illness, the illness will return. Treating a revolution like a cold is an excellent analogy. If you always pick sketchy people to go out with, they're going to end the same way. If you always engage in risky behaviors, eventually it's going to catch up with you. It just is. All right. Many liberals who supported nationalist agendas, people wanted independent nations from foreign rule. Remember, not every country that exists in Europe today existed in 1815, 1820, 1830. And we'll pick it up here tomorrow with the revolutions in the 1830s and 1848, which is arguably one of the most important years in the history of the world, especially in Europe. We'll pick it up here with the 1830s and 1840s, and we'll finish revolutions tomorrow. It's 18 slides, easy peasy. If any questions come up, there is a Jamboard for this chapter. I'll put this chapter in there if you have any questions about politics or how it relates to America. And if I will answer it historically, I'll talk about things from a political standpoint, but not from a ideology standpoint. Don't ask me what I think. I will not tell you until you're a sophomore in college. So that's that. Any questions about anything? All right, good. Nice discussion. Those were good questions. Gosh, Ben's gone. No, he's back. All right. If you have any questions, I'll be here. Enjoy your lunch. Keep working. If you haven't done the corrections yet, please do. If you owe me work, please get it in. If any of those links don't work, let me know. And see you all tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. And I'll edit and cut and post this thing in a little while.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one.
I will. Thanks. Maybe I'll have two.